Hello again. It's been many years since I made a video for World of Warcraft, but War Within beta is out. I had a couple of days off work and I had some thoughts, so I thought I'd shout into the void and put them out there for either nobody to see, or hopefully maybe the devs will see and it will give them some ideas and some feedback and some help into understanding how it feels from a player's perspective in terms of playing Evoker. So this first video I'm going to focus on Evoker, and then I'm going to probably put out a couple more based on other aspects of War Within beta. But this, I plan on playing Evoker most in the War Within, so I'm going to do some thoughts on how I feel about it right now. So, no more wasting time. To kick things off, Flame Shaper for Devastation. On the whole, this is feeling really good. This is the one that I've actually enjoyed the most. I leveled to 80 with that on the leveling realm, the beta. I've been playing dungeons on the max level realm, and it's the one that I'm enjoying the most between Flame Shaper and Scale Commander. The Firestorm changes I think were very welcome. I all through Dragonflight wanted to be able to play with Firestorm just because it was quite a cool ability. But it was always a waste of a button, so I never did. But now the changes they've made with a couple of different talents and things like that makes it actually pretty good, and it gives you a bit of reactivity to your gameplay outside of just instant living flames or essence burst procs. You've actually also then got Firestorm procs that you can fire out there, and if you get really lucky you can get 3, 4, 5 firestorms all stacked on top of each other, and it actually ends up doing quite a lot of damage in those big packs where you get really lucky with those procs. It will be your number one AoE ability, so it is actually a lot of fun in that aspect. But there is one thing that I think could just finish it off. They've done a really good job of tweaking it to get it to this point. But considering the way that Flame Shaper works, so anybody that hasn't actually looked at Flame Shaper, you get an ability called Engulf, and that does damage, and that damage is increased based on the number of periodic dots you have on the target. So in this particular build, because you want to stack up as many dots as possible, you've also got your Fire Breath that you get on the target. You can get something called Enkindle, which is effectively your Season 2 and Season 4 Obsidian Shards. So Essence abilities then do 20% of their damage over the next 8 seconds. So that gives you another dot. And then you also you want to grab Ruby Embers, just so that while the damage of Ruby Embers is kind of meh, it doesn't really do much. You just want that extra periodic effect in order to get another 50% increase on your Engulf, because Engulf does hit like an absolute truck. So in order to try and make Firestorm synergize really well with Flame Shaper, which is very obviously designed to be the red magic hero talent, the thought would be that instead of Firestorm dealing damage in the way like Earthquake does, or the way that Rain of Fire does, because it is basically exactly the same as Earthquake and Rain of Fire. It's just anything within the area will take damage if they happen to be there at the time that it procs. In order to make it synergize better with Flame Shaper, and as also kind of get around nobody likes those abilities. Earthquake feels bad to play, Rain of Fire can be felt bad to play, if the tank pulls them out of your Rain of Fire, or a shaman fucking thunder fucks them away, and now suddenly the enemies aren't inside your Firestorm. That feels really bad. So if this, instead of just dealing damage every 2 seconds every time it ticked, applied a dot, so that as long as they're there at some point throughout the life of the Firestorm, they get this dot that's then going to do the damage, that would make it feel less bad to play, because if they move out they've still got this dot that's already been applied, and B, it's another dot, so it plays even more with Engulf, and it just feeds into the whole synergy of the build. So that's just one thought I had as to how they could just take it a little bit further and make Firestorm actually really be the standout ability for the red kind of Evoker Flame Shaper. The other thing that's a little bit strange is kind of the position of imminent destruction. So this causes Deep Breath to reduce the essence costs of Disintegrating Pyre and increase their damage done by 10% for 12 seconds. Deep Breath is very heavily baked into Scale Commander, And Scale Commander is very much disintegrate focused and very much right side of the tree focused. So to have this over here behind Pyre and Firestorm talents is just a bit weird. You're never going to get over here as Scale Commander, and you're never going to want to use this as Flame Shaper. So it's basically a dead talent. So either changing this to be something a bit more Flame Shaper orientated, or moving it and swapping it with, I don't know, something else. So that's a bit of a weird one. And the only other kind of wish list I have really for Flame Shaper is the visuals for Engulf and Consume Flame really could do with really an uplift. I mean, for buttons that are so impactful, they do so much damage, they can, you play entirely around your Engulf when you're playing as Flame Shaper. You just don't even see them. There's no visual impact whatsoever for when they go off. So giving some kind of really nice, awesome visual to Engulf and Consume Flame would be just the icing on the cake. But other than that, Flame Shaper I think is in a really good spot. Just little small wish for Firestorm to be a bit more user friendly. So Scale Commander, let me swap over. Scale Commander, I'm probably gonna sing its praises a lot less. I know that tuning, it's obviously beta, tuning can happen, so Scale Commander could possibly still be equal in terms of damage, but right now with its current tuning and the current numbers, it just does nowhere near the damage that Flame Shaper does. But that's fine, they can tweak that's not a problem. But there are some fundamental problems with just the way it plays, some of the flow, some of the kind of priority decisions that you have to make, and one really, really bad point which definitely needs to be looked at. So let's start with the kind of the chaining, the pain bit, which is the kind of mass disintegrate. So basically how the kind of the hook of Scale Commander is after you've done an empowered spell, it will then cause your next disintegrate to be a mass disintegrate, and that will then hit 4 targets. So just do 4, basically AoE disintegrate. Now what's a bit awkward in this is that from testing, and this could be something that will be fixed and it'll be polished and all that kind of stuff, but chaining disintegrates is something we very much got into the rhythm of doing, because it's just, you've pretty much been never essence starved, so you pretty much are just chaining disintegrates back to back to back. But chaining a mass disintegrate can get a bit funky, because if you chain a mass disintegrate into a normal disintegrate, that last tick disappears and you don't then capitalize on it, so you're kind of in this weird scenario where you're like, oh, it's a mass disintegrate, I need to fully channel it and then start casting another disintegrate. So it can be a bit awkward and a bit weird. The visuals are also very hit and miss. Sometimes it shows you chaining all 4, sometimes it doesn't, so that could do with some work. So when I saw this all on paper, I thought mass disintegrate, that sounds fucking cool. Heavily focused on deep breath. Deep breath is like kind of a cool spell, like when you're out in the world and you're questing and you're doing stuff like that, deep breath just feels really fucking cool. You're just dragging, you're blasting shit in it, and it does feel really good. But then when you get into dungeons and raids and things like that, it's just more often than not it's a hindrance rather than a help, and you often find yourself wishing that it was different. And this kind of forces you to play deep breath a lot more. Gets a 20% increase to damage. It then leaves a humongous dot on the enemies, which does, like 150% of the actual damage of deep breath. And then it also causes them to take increased damage from bombardments and essence ability. So a lot of it is playing around. Basically, it's deep breath and disintegrate is Scale Commander. So changing deep breath to be something that's a little bit more user friendly and a little bit more usable would be great. I know that this causes you to allow you to steer it, so you're no longer just doing a straight line. I actually prefer the straight line. I've got quite good at selecting it, pointing where I want it to go, and just doing a quick little hop across all the enemies, landing perfectly the other side and blasting. But now you're like aim, okay, now start driving, and now I need to cancel it, and oh fuck, lag, okay, now I've gone 4,000 yards further than I wanted to go because the server took a second or two to actually acknowledge that I cancelled it. So I'm not a fan of that. I really wish they would just turn this into a kind of Syndragos's Breath style ability, you know, have this talent here do that. Leave Deep Breath for Flame Shaper as it is now. You send it and it sends you across the battlefield. But change this, instead of allowing you to steer it. It's called Scale Commander. The whole point is that you are commanding bombardments from your allies and things like that. I think I describe it here. Yeah, natural born leaders to become better, you know, summon troops. So bombardments and this summons troops. As you do stuff, people bombard the enemy, and that's a source of your damage. But changing this to be a Syndragosa style ability where you then effectively it just fires off. Like imagine just 3 Drakthir just come swooping in above you and just Deep Breath down in front of you for, you know, 30 yards in a straight line out in front of you really wide. That would just feel so fucking cool. And it would be completely unobtrusive. You don't have to think, where am I going to land? Am I going to be flying through some shit that's going to kill me? Like it would just make life so much better, and it would drastically change the feel of Scale Commander, because every minute you have it. Oh, ignore my UI. I usually play on ultra wide, but I didn't want it to look weird in the footage by having ultra wide, so my UI is fucked because of that. But yeah, having Deep Breath on a minute, trying to hit that every minute because it does a good portion of your damage. In its current design, it just feels really bad. So yeah, Syndragos's Breath style Deep Breath would be just absolute chef's kiss if that was the case. And speaking of bombardments, I mean, I know it's numbers and they can just be tweaked and that kind of stuff, but in their current state, like they're an absolute joke. The damage they do is non-existent. I just did a dungeon just to test sort of Scale Commander versus Flame Shaper's damage, and the bombardments, because it's shared with augmentation, so it's a damage that your party members can also do, which means it also shows up as their damage as well. So I looked through everybody's damage from the entire dungeon, and it accounted for 5% of the entire group's damage, which is not really a lot. Like for me, it was, hopefully I'll be able to see it, maybe not. It was about 1.5% of my damage, which, I mean, that's not even, doesn't even need to exist at that point. It's so little. So yeah, some improvements that could be made for Scale Commander. Right now it's fairly night and day. Flame Shaper is just in a drastically better state than Scale Commander is. Some of that is down to number tuning, but a big part of it is down to feel. It feels so much better to play Flame Shaper than it does to play Scale Commander because of some of those issues. So that are my wishes for Scale Commander. But yeah, and that's about it for DPS. So let's look at preservation now. So swap over to preservation. So I'm not going to go into any real major detail on preservation because I do mainly DPS. I do like to heal, but I also can't be bothered a lot of the time because it's just too much pressure and stress, so I don't bother. So on the whole, both Flame Shaper and Chrono Warden both feel really good. You know, they have a slightly different play style. You lean into different things. Like Chrono Warden, you're very much throwing out loads of living flames through your empowered abilities, and Flame Shaper is very much just trying to get shitloads of hots out and then doing a massive engulf and, you know, using Consume Flame to heal everyone. Like, you know, they both play subtly different, but they're both really fun. They both feel really impactful and really powerful. I do worry though, this is more of a me type thing, but having so much of your power tied into Tip the Scales temporal burst, into temporal burst, which procs off of Tip the Scales and Threads of Fate. My worry is that with that being a 2-minute cooldown, it's kind of an oh shit button. So having so much of your power, which is like 40 seconds after your oh shit button, tied into that, I do worry that it's gonna go unutilized a lot of the time because you're kind of saving it for, you don't want to use it just in case just around the corner is a need for an instant spirit bloom or an instant dream breath or or an instant fire breath. So that's more me. I like to use my cooldowns as a healer for when I need them and keep them there for, and if I get to the end of the dungeon I never used them, cool, things was casual and it was not a problem. But it's definitely a lot more kind of organized group play buff. I like it, but that's just my only worry. A lot of people, it would probably be very much Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it. I just found that I just kept not using it because I was just sitting on it. So yeah, both Chrono Warden and Flame Shaper both feel really good. Although the only thing I'm not a fan of is the teleport, the warp for Chrono Warden. I fucking hate it because I don't like the fact that I can't tell where I am, even if it's for just like a second or two, just to not know where my character is and what if I'm in something or I'm getting hit by something. And yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Other people maybe are. This is personal preference, but I much prefer seeing my character just hover off to the wherever it is I pointed them the direction of. So that's the only gripe there. So talking more about preservation as a whole rather than the hero talent specifically, I think the dev team have done a really good job during Dragonflight and going into War Within with experimentation. They've done a lot of experimentation. They've done Plunderstorm. They've done WoW Remix. They've done all sorts of different things. They've done the upgrading gear. They've done they're doing now delves with the more focus on open world content. They're doing lots of experimentation, and that's great. But the primary thing to remember is that experimentations are to learn from. And I think the experiment of the 25-yard range for Evokers, I think that's an experiment that failed, and they really need to just do something about that. It's not huge for devastation, you can work around it. It just gets a bit annoying because you're always just a little bit out of range. But for preservation, the 25-yard range is what's made me stop healing. Basically, at the beginning of Dragonflight, I was in a guild, trying to progress through Mythic raiding, and I was on Dathia, and trying to heal Dathia with a 25-yard range just made me stop healing. I just quit. I didn't want to raid. I just didn't want to heal on a 25-yard range healer, and it actually made me quit raiding entirely. That was it. After that, after reaching Dathia on Mythic as a preservation evoker, I quit raiding entirely because the 25-yard range feels so bad. So the experiments failed, learn from it, evolve it, try something new, but fucking please do something about it. This isn't an ego trip. Don't sit there and be stubborn and be like, no, I think it works. Well, if everyone's crying out that it doesn't work, don't care if you think it works. It doesn't work. So that's that rant over. Emerald Blossom, I think, needs some love. Right now, it just feels bad to press it. Down to two factors. One, Echo just has so much versatility and so much power for the essence cost that it has compared to Emerald Blossom. And secondly, fucking every fucker runs out of the Emerald Blossom before it bloody blooms. Can you just, if you see it appear underneath you, stand in it. Don't fucking run out. So for those reasons, Emerald Blossom I think could do with some love. I don't know what love it needs. I'm not gonna try to design how Emerald Blossom could be better. I don't have any ideas. I just know that it just doesn't feel very good to press it at the minute. So yeah, that's that thought. I think the entire talent tree could do with a bit of a prune. You can see here, there's a lot of untaken nodes. There's a lot of competing nodes. I would love to do a build that focuses purely on green, but so much of the stuff on the right is just too important. So much of the stuff in the middle is just too important, especially for Mythic Plus. So yeah, a bit of a tidy up could be really helpful. But that's just my main thoughts there. And then the only other real thing to kind of call out is the 4-piece for the next tier for reversion is quite honestly an actual joke. Like 200% increase on a reversion every 15 seconds. That's hilarious. Like, no, it's terrible. So yes, so that's everything I thought about preservation. And then lastly, let's talk augmentation. Now this one's going to be very divisive because this is my thoughts, my preference. There's probably other people that are going to completely disagree. That's fine. You're welcome to your opinion. But as far as I'm concerned, augmentation is another experiment that failed and needs to be deleted. It's the whole trying to introduce this support spec, the support role into the game. It's just not working. I could almost guarantee that if augmentation wasn't in the meta, wasn't as powerful as it was, fuck all people would be playing it. The only reason so many people are playing it is because it's just so powerful. And they're going to very slowly be whittled down and nerfed to the point where nobody will play it. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, augmentation's just awful. But I think it can be salvaged because, like, the theme of it, the bronze and the earth theme is so cool. The visuals of their abilities are really cool. And I think it's perfectly positioned in terms of its visuals to become a tank spec. I don't see why it couldn't. You know, an earth-based, you know, make it melee based if you have to. That's fine. You know, it's not unheard of. You know, you've got hunters that are 2 ranged and 1 melee spec. It could be melee based abilities. That's not crazy to do. So yeah, just as far as I'm concerned, augmentation can just be deleted and replaced with a tank spec, and because it's just shit. And I think that's probably everything Evoker related. So yeah, other than that, if there's anybody still around from the old days, from the Mr. Pandaria days, and remembers my videos, say hello. I doubt it very much, but you never know. Maybe the devs see this, maybe they won't. Either way, I'm going to come back with some more thoughts on delves and some other classes as well that I have an interest in playing. And yeah, just shout out into the void just to get it off my chest. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much. Goodbye.